NetScout presents On Guard, insights and solutions surrounding the most complex problems of our connected world, from those who help protect it.
Hello and welcome to today's session of On Guard, covering threat intel. My name is Gary Sockrider. I'm the Director of Security Solutions here at NetScout. And today we are very fortunate to have three distinguished members of our Atlas Security Engineering and Response team. First up, we have Hardik Modi, AVP of Threat and Mitigation. Next, Roland Dobbins, Principal Engineer of ACERT. And third, Richard Hummel, ACERT Threat Intelligence Manager. So gentlemen, thank you all for being here today, and let's dive right in. I'd like to start with Hardik. Let's talk first, Hardik, about how you see threat intelligence, and does it apply in the realm of DDoS?
Thanks, Gary. Great question. So as much as we think of cybersecurity as involving computers and servers and networks, and you hear about IoT and all of these essentially computing kind of devices and terms, at the core of the security problem is that there's a threat, and the threat kind of people have described it as, to think of it as a who, not a what. The threat is a person or a group of people, and these are essentially your adversaries. They are the ones who are looking to exploit those networks and computers and devices in furtherance of their objectives. And objectives can range from espionage, and I'm trying to steal critical information from, say, governments or security agencies. It could be intellectual property theft. Again, I'm breaking into maybe a pharmaceutical company and stealing corporate secrets. It could be as we've kind of moved along, there's like denial of access in the form of encryption and encrypting entire enterprises. Now you pay the ransomware, otherwise you don't have access to your data or your systems. And so there's a variety of motivations, but ultimately there are humans on the other side. And that's what we think of as the threat. And the study of the threat is what I consider threat intelligence. And so for people like us who are on this call, and there are many professionals on our teams and at teams and other places around the world, what we collectively do is focus on the other side. What is the adversary doing? In some instances, who is the adversary? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? And then, yes, ultimately it comes down to how are they doing it? All of which is with the intention, the desire. Our objective is to better inform and protect our customers. So that's what I just did was kind of lay up threat intelligence writ large, across in particular the cybersecurity domain. Now, part two of your question was, does it apply to DDoS? And I'm going to say absolutely yes, because again, DDoS is always launched by a human or a group of humans who have an objective, and this then kind of manifests itself across networks across the world, day in and day out. We ourselves, like our team, in various forms, have been studying this for a good 20 years now. And yes, so it really just comes down to, even as with the rest of cybersecurity, DDoS is something that is launched by humans, and it is in our interest to understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it. And through this knowledge, we build better defenses for ourselves and our customers. So yeah, that's sort of like how I would frame it, in response to your question.
Yeah, actually, so I wanted to add a little bit on to what Hardik said. Yes, the human beings and the tactics that they use and the technical aspects of those attacks all fall under the realm of threat intelligence. And what we try to do is we actually want to provide our customers with actionable applied threat intelligence. And so we take our study of the attackers and the attack methodologies and the tactics that they're using and the types of targets that they're going after, and we actually imbue that knowledge into the form of actionable threat intelligence that's pushed out into our solutions so that our customers can actually gain that expertise expertise and have access to that expertise in such a way that they can use it to make forwarding or drop decisions about packets on their network. And so that's something that we really strive for, is not just threat intelligence in the abstract, but threat intelligence that directly applies to the customer's networks, that can be applied through the solutions to actually allow them to have active defense against those threats.
Absolutely. And there's lots of other initiatives out there to do this. I mean, let's just look at the kill chain, right? The whole purpose of that is to look at motivations of attackers and how they get through an organization so that you can tactically operate on any one of those portions of a kill chain. You also have MITRE ATT&CK framework that's designed to target very specific elements of an adversary's kind of pipeline or methodology, all with the intent to tactically operate on that knowledge, that threat intelligence, to better protect and mitigate against those threats.
Great points from both of you. Thank you for that. I completely agree. And in fact, you may have seen, I'm sure you're aware, recently MITRE has released the Defend framework in addition to the ATT&CK framework. I think it's really interesting to sort of see both sides of that coin. It's still in beta, but they are working on a process where you can sort of map between the attack vectors and the defend vectors. How do we deal with these problems? But I think that's the whole point of this threat intel, is to provide our customers with the information they need to be successful. So thank you both for laying that out. All right, so next I'm going to turn to Roland. So Roland, I want to get your perspective again. Does attribution ever happen in DDoS, and what impacts have you seen on the landscape?
Sure. So attribution can be very, very challenging. Obviously, the folks who are launching DDoS attacks, they are criminals of one type or another. Sometimes they are also acting on behalf of political entities. And we see a lot of DDoS attacks. I think that we saw more than 10 million DDoS attacks during 2020, for example. We're seeing more than 32,000 distinct DDoS attacks a day right now. And we're not seeing 32,000 attributions. From time to time, a specific threat actor will end up being identified and in some cases brought to justice in various jurisdictions around the world. It doesn't happen nearly often enough, unfortunately. However, there's another form of attribution besides identifying the actual person or people behind the attacks, and that's understanding the threat actor, whether that's an individual attacker or whether it's a group, understanding their modus operandi, the tactics they use, the vectors they select, the types of methodologies that they use to attack, the level of pre-attack reconnaissance that they utilize, and so forth. And in many cases, because we have a very, very broad data horizon that is representative of DDoS attacks across the entire internet, we get a very good sampling. We're able to actually take a look at those DDoS attacks, and we can, in many cases, identify a particular threat actor or a particular DDoS campaign. In particular, the LBA, Lazarus Bear Armada, high-profile DDoS extortion campaign. We were able to develop a profile for that threat actor, and we knew about some of these attacks directly because we work with our customers to successfully defend against those attacks. But we were able to step out beyond that direct experience and able to produce a detailed profile of this particular threat actor across more than 200, attacking more than 200 organizations across 40 countries around the world over a period of months. And quite frankly, that had never been done before. And so our understanding of the DDoS attack landscape from a technical, hands-on perspective, as well as our ability to mine that very broad data horizon, allows us to, in many cases, identify threat actors, and then we provide actionable threat intelligence on those DDoS threat actors and the types of attacks they launch to our customers in the form of our solutions.
Yeah, so I mean, attribution is historically just hard in general. My previous job, I used to work with FireEye, and prior to that, Eyesight Partners. And even then, when you're talking about like nation state adversaries, it's difficult to do attribution. I can trace attribution and what I've been doing back to when I first left the Army and was working for our Army contracting. And one of the kind of running jokes that we had was, attribution only happens when an adversary makes a mistake. And, we would chuckle at that. And it's very true, because a lot of these adversaries have been doing this for decades and decades. And in fact, if you're talking nation states, you're talking governments behind this, right? How often does the US government make a mistake in their cyber operations? How long did it take to reveal some of those operations, right? There's a lot of leaks that do it now, but prior to that, did anybody else know about that? Consider the same aspects of a foreign nation state, right? And so now you factor in not only the level of expertise there, but now you start adding in these anonymous tools. You have VPNs, you have proxies, you have underground networks, you have cryptocurrencies that allow for anonymization. There's so many different aspects that add to that level of difficulty in attaining that attribution. And so Roland's absolutely right. It's very difficult to do so. And when we start talking about attribution in the DDoS space, most of the time we're talking about a campaign. We can classify that campaign based on characteristics and patterns, but actually getting to an individual sitting behind a keyboard is extremely difficult to do, if not impossible in many cases.
That's right. And one additional note on the subject of attribution, yes, we all want to see criminals brought to justice. However, I will point out that there is sometimes an overemphasis on attribution and it's a natural human inclination. If an organization comes under attack, they want to know who's attacking us, right? And maintaining situational awareness, being aware of different currents and local events, international events, relationships with supply chain partners, geographies in which organizations do business, all these different kinds of situational awareness can be very helpful in understanding the current level of risk. But the simple fact of the matter is that any organization that has any sort of useful internet properties that are vital to its business online, which is pretty much most organizations these days, can be hit by a DDoS attack, either directly or as a result of unintended but broad and sometimes very deep collateral impact. And so while, yes, it's good if attribution can take place and ultimately arrest and prosecution and conviction can take place, the simple fact of the matter is that organizations have to be prepared to defend themselves against attacks 24/7 by 365. And that needs to always be the focus, is on being prepared, having a plan when an attack takes place, successfully executing that plan, and taking feedback from the execution to make the plan even better for next time. And hopefully at some point, some attribution can take place as well. But that should be a secondary concern.
Completely agree. I think that's really great perspective. I mean, everybody, as you said, Roland, is interested in attribution. And, as Richard pointed out, it can be extremely difficult. But in the end of the day, customers, network operators, enterprises, all, every entity that relies on the internet wants to make sure that their network is accessible all the time. And so really being prepared and being protected ultimately is more important to individuals than attribution. Attribution obviously is important to society as a whole. Any closing thoughts on that subject, Kartik?
Yeah, I'm actually going to pull on the thread that each of you are kind of been working on here, and I'm going to say that defense, ultimately, the fundamental kind of aspect of DDoS defense is knowing your own network. We can tell you about who's out there and what they're trying and what tactics they use and when they might come after you because you're in this vertical. When it comes down to defending yourself, there's information that we will provide that is really, really useful. But especially for the availability of your services, in the face of DDoS attacks, a lot of this will come down to you knowing what your services look like, what they depend on, and then using, I'd say products like ours to tuned to the specifics of your service to provide the correct level of defense. And so the threat intel is basically a way of testing your defenses, of knowledge that you can use to enhance your defense. But your defense posture primarily should be centered on the services that you're providing. And this for all of us in Threatland, it took a while, certainly for me, it took a while to come to this realization that, as much as we study the adversary and what they do, really, defense is about yourself and knowing yourself. So I'll just close with that.
Excellent feedback. Thank you, Hardik. Okay, so next I'd like to turn to Richard with a question. You know, ransomware certainly isn't new, but it's been making a lot of headlines lately, and it's certainly something that much of the world is focused on. So, Richard, do you think, could you tell us a little bit more about, does DDoS factor into this kind of threat activity in any way? What is your perspective and what is your experience?
Yeah, certainly. So first off, let me give a little bit of a history lesson here, and I'll ask a rhetorical question. Did you know ransomware started in 1989? Most people probably don't, right? And the fact is ransomware has been around for a long time, and DDoS has been around for even longer. Both of these things impact availability of services. And so a ransomware event is essentially a denial of service of critical systems or infrastructure that a victim needs to use. And so there's absolutely some parallels between these. Now, I'll tell you the reason people don't really know that ransomware started back then is because it wasn't until around 2012, 2013 that it really kind of went mainstream. And that's an important kind of time frame because enter things like Game Over Zeus and CryptoLocker. And both of those were kind of the first advent, if you will, of kind of what we consider a double extortion. And I'm going to talk about a triple extortion that includes the DDoS aspect. But going back to Game Over Zeus and CryptoLocker, you would have these adversaries that would get in there. They would deploy their banking malware, in this case, Game Over Zeus, or Zeus, as most people know from back in 2005. And they would essentially steal files. They would compromise account credentials. They would do automated wire transfers from your bank account. But then as a last-ditch effort, what they would do is they would deploy CryptoLocker, and on their way out, after they've stolen your money, they will then extort you for a ransom payment to decrypt your files. And so it's kind of a 1-2 tap. Well, fast forward now until some of these recent groups like SunCrypt and RagnarLocker and even the DarkSide crew. And DarkSide's going to trigger a lot of memories for people because the Colonial Pipeline, right? The DarkSide operators went after that. They shut down the pipeline by targeting a third-party vendor that was basically responsible for the financial aspect of the Colonial Pipeline. Well, what most people probably don't know is on April 24th, DarkSide actually started offering DDoS services in conjunction with their ransomware. And so we have seen more and more over the recent years where adversaries are taking this ransomware, which is like the biggest, baddest thing in the cyber world right now, coupling that with DDoS. And now you have this triple extortion where we're going to encrypt your files, we're going to steal all your files, we're going to threaten you to post those online, whether it's PII or sensitive company information, maybe it's intellectual property. And so you better pay us or we're going to post this. Oh, guess what? Even after we've done those two things, now we're going to extort you by launching a DDoS attack and saying we're going to keep doing this and shutting down your network unless you pay us. And so you have this triple event here where adversaries are leveraging this, and we're seeing this more and more. And so, yes, absolutely, DDoS is entering this kind of scene of this high-profile cyber attack. And we surveyed enterprises and internet service providers over the past year. And one of the things that they had noted was that extortion for DDoS was super high, right? So they 125% increase in DDoS extortion events, which is crazy. But the number one threat that was said was ransomware. And so you actually have ransomware as the number one and DDoS extortion as a number two threat concern for enterprises and internet service providers going into 2021, which is crazy. And so, yeah, you absolutely have this tie over, this convergence, if you will, of threats that's causing a big problem. And absolutely, we should consider DDoS as part of just a normal toolkit for adversaries these days. One of the things that I've been saying on several of these kind of interviews and conferences is it's not a matter of if you're going to get attacked anymore, it's a matter of when. Roland talked about exceeding 10 million DDoS attacks in 2020. We're on track to beat that in 2021. So attacks are everywhere. Industries are getting hit everywhere. Victims we've never seen before are getting DDoS attacked. And couple that with the increase in ransomware, the increase in visibility there, more adversaries getting into the game. And yeah, you have this kind of scary picture that ransomware and DDoS are going hand in hand. I'll pause there, and I know we've got a couple minutes left, so I'll let Roland or Hardik chime in there with any thoughts.
Sure. So Richard's absolutely right. And to go back to what Hardik was saying previously as well, understanding what you're protecting is key. Preparation is the key to successful DDoS defense. And if we take a look at the impact of ransomware, we take a look at the mentality of the attackers and the things that they find to be of interest in selecting when they're going to launch their attack. There are remarkable similarities between ransomware attacks and DDoS attacks. We see the more sophisticated, mature DDoS attackers will attack organizations at critical times in their business cycles, for example. We see the same thing with ransomware. We see the attackers performing pre-attack reconnaissance on the DDoS side to determine which elements of the application and services delivery chain they should attack to have maximal impact. Same thing happens on the ransomware side, where the attackers figure out specifically what's the highest priority data to target to cripple the enterprise. And as Richard pointed out as well, the ransomware is actually making use of means that are typically associated with confidentiality and integrity to cause a loss of availability. So the parallels are very high in terms of what the attackers do. What the defenders must do, the parallels are there also. You have to be prepared. You have to have a plan. You have to have complete visibility into all of your network traffic, understand the traffic profiles. You have to understand which elements of your service delivery chain are very, very critical and ensure that they're all protected. You have to have a cross-functional team to deal with incoming attacks and threats and to respond very quickly when there's an incident. You have to have both an internal and an external communications plan. And so the parallels are remarkable. If an organization are well prepared to deal with ransomware, they're already 80% of where they need to be able to defend successfully against DDoS attacks. If they're already prepared to deal with DDoS attacks, then they're about 80% of where they need to be able to deal with ransomware as well. And so on either way, they need to close that additional 20% and they'll be in good shape.
And just from an intelligence standpoint, if you think about like what is the purpose of the DDoS attack in conjunction with those two other facets of these extortion attacks? So let's say somebody's made their way into your enterprise, has initiated the encryption. You're feeling the impact of that in the sense that critical services are unavailable, or you're finding that, hey, I don't have my billing information available anymore, so maybe I need to turn off my gas pipeline because I don't know who I'm going to be billing for the gas that I'm delivering. So you're already in this state. They then inform you that, oh yeah, by the way, we stole a lot of your data and we're going to dump it on a site unless you pay this ransom, And so even as you're contemplating these two aspects, let's say your website is still up, so you're able to communicate with the outside world. Let's say some other aspects of your networks are still going, so you're working with your partners, your communication systems are still up and running. People are still able to VPN in, at least to try and participate in the restoration process. Well, this is when they DDoS you, right? And this is where the DDoS is really going to hurt, because now that site that last little bit of your systems that you still had access and availability to, that's under attack. And so it's really this is why it's not that hey, DDoS was available, so that just got folded in. It does play a role, and again, for us on the on the defense side, it's understanding this, and as Richard and Roland both getting at, this is preparing for one and preparing for another are not two separate things. This is in 2021, this is one big event, and that you as a certainly if you're responsible for defense within your enterprise, then absolutely you need to be ready for it. So I'll close with that, Gary.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, just in closing, I just wanted to sort of pull it together. We talked a lot about threat intelligence today, in the realm of DDoS within threat intelligence, attribution, the connections to ransomware. I think the key takeaway here is a couple things. First of all, it's obvious that collectively we have a rich set of experience and expertise across this team in dealing with these threats. We know that we have great intel. We know that we have the ability to share this intel with our products in real time. and the ability to continuously monitor and update and improve our defenses. And so I think that's the real takeaway here. This is actionable threat intel, to use, I believe, Roland's term, that you can use every day to make your defenses stronger. So with that, I just want to thank our panelists, Hardik, Roland, Richard. Appreciate your time today, and also appreciate our attendees in joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching this installment of On Guard, presented by NetScout, Guardians of the Connected World.